The first time Prince Kale looked at me, the entire royal ballroom went silent. The music faltered, the laughter dimmed, and even the crystal chandeliers felt as though they were holding their light in suspension. It wasn't because I was important. It wasn't because I was particularly stunning or powerful. It was because the most arrogant alpha in the kingdom stopped mid-step, turned his head slowly in my direction, and inhaled as if he had just discovered something forbidden in the air. Something intoxicating. My name is Elion Vale, and until that night, I had lived a life so ordinary that even the court historians would have overlooked it without hesitation. I am an omega of minor noble birth, raised quietly on the outskirts of the capital where the palace towers appear distant and unreal, like something out of a storybook rather than a place one might actually enter. My family's estate is modest, our title barely remembered during official gatherings, and our lives have always been defined by simplicity rather than ambition. I had never dreamed of standing in the royal palace, let alone being noticed within it. That changed 3 weeks before the ball, when a carriage bearing the royal crest stopped before our gates at dawn. I remember the sound of the wheels over gravel, the way the horses snorted into the cold morning air, and how my mother's hands trembled as she accepted the sealed envelope from the courier. The wax bore the unmistakable emblem of the crown, pressed deeply and deliberately, as though to remind the recipient that this was not a request but a command. Inside, written in elegant script, were the words that would unravel the quiet shape of my life. Mandatory royal ball selection. Attendance required for all unmated omegas of noble blood. Mandatory. The word echoed louder than the rest. There was no polite refusal, no escape from the royal summons. Every unmated omega of recognized lineage was to present themselves at the palace for inspection and potential selection. It was a tradition revived after years of silence, meant to secure alliances and ensure the continuation of powerful bloodlines. I had heard whispers of it in passing conversations, always distant, always theoretical. I never imagined my name would be inked into its reality. In the days that followed, our home became a whirlwind of preparation. Tailors were summoned. Fabrics were chosen. My mother supervised every stitch of the formal attire I would wear, her expression a careful balance of pride and fear. She did not say much, but I could sense the weight in her gaze whenever she looked at me, as though she were already bracing herself to let me go. My father remained composed, offering practical advice about court etiquette, yet even he avoided speaking the name that hovered unspoken between us. Kale Draven. The Crown Prince. The undefeated war hero. The alpha whose presence alone was said to silence entire halls. Stories about him traveled faster than official proclamations. They said he had never shown interest in choosing a mate. They said countless omegas had tried and failed to capture his attention. They said his standards were impossibly high, his demeanor cold, his patience thin. Some described him as brilliant and disciplined. Others called him mercilessly proud. Every version of him carried the same conclusion. He did not bend and he did not yield. On the evening of the ball, as our carriage approached the capital, I pressed my gloved hands together in my lap to stop them from shaking. The palace rose ahead of us, illuminated in gold and silver, its windows blazing like a constellation brought down to earth. Music drifted faintly through the night air even before we stepped inside. When the doors opened and I entered the grand ballroom, I felt as though I had crossed into another world entirely. Silk gowns shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers. Alphas stood in structured uniforms or tailored suits, their presence radiating quiet authority. Omegas gathered in clusters, each one composed, each one aware of the scrutiny awaiting us. I told myself I was invisible among them. Just another face in a line of hopefuls, another name on a list that would soon be forgotten. I focused on steadying my breath, on keeping my posture graceful, on remembering every lesson drilled into me about composure and dignity. I had no grand ambition to capture the prince's attention. In truth, I hoped the evening would pass without incident, that I would return home unchanged and unnoticed. Then the main doors opened. A hush rippled outward like a wave striking stone. He entered without fanfare, yet the air shifted around him as though acknowledging something greater. Tall, composed, dressed in formal black adorned with subtle royal insignia, Kale Draven walked with the confidence of someone who had never doubted his own strength. His expression was unreadable, his gaze cool and assessing as he moved down the line of assembled omegas. One by one he passed them. A glance here. A polite nod there. Nothing lingered. Until he passed me. For a brief, fragile second, I believed I had been spared. Then he stopped. There was no dramatic gesture, no sudden exclamation. Just a pause. A stillness that deepened and spread. Slowly, deliberately, he stepped backward, returning to stand directly before me. His eyes lifted to meet mine, and I felt as though every carefully constructed wall around my composure had cracked at once. He leaned slightly closer. And he inhaled. It was subtle, almost inaudible, but in that silence it might as well have thundered. His gaze darkened, not with anger, not with disdain, but with something far more dangerous. Interest. In that single breath, something shifted between us, something I did not understand yet could not deny. The night that was meant to be a formality had transformed into something else entirely. The music still played. The chandeliers still shimmered. Nobles still stood in glittering clusters across the ballroom. But none of it reached me anymore. All I could feel was the weight of his gaze, heavy and unrelenting, as though the rest of the kingdom had faded into nothing but distant noise. "What is that scent?" he asked softly. My lips parted, but no sound came out at first. My pulse was racing so violently I was afraid he could hear it. I had prepared for polite conversation, for measured introductions, for a brief curtsy and a forgettable exchange. I had not prepared for this intensity, this scrutiny that felt like it was peeling away every layer I had carefully constructed around myself. "I don't know what you mean, Your Highness." He looked at me, his eyes sharpened. Up close they looked really charming. He studied me as if weighing the truth of my words against the evidence in the air between us. "You're suppressing your pheromones," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. A ripple of awareness moved through me. If he could tell that much from a single breath, then he was far more perceptive than the rumors suggested. Or perhaps it was simply that my scent, traitorous and bold, was speaking louder than I ever intended it to. "Yes," I admitted, barely above a whisper. His jaw tightened slightly, and for a brief second I thought I saw irritation flash across his features. Not at me but at the fact itself. "Why go through the trouble?" he asked. The question was simple but the answer was not. "It's because I valued peace. Because attention from powerful alphas was rarely gentle, and I preferred to move through the world without being hunted by it." But those truths felt too raw to offer him. "It's not a big deal for events like this," I said instead. A faint, almost humorless curve touched his lips. "Oh really?" he echoed. Behind us, the master of ceremonies shifted nervously, clearly aware that the prince had lingered longer than he had with any other Omega that were present. "Your Highness," the man ventured carefully, "shall we continue the selection process?" Prince Kale did not look away from me. "I'm not done," he replied calmly. The air tightened. Whispers began at the edges of the ballroom, subtle but spreading quickly. I could feel the curiosity of the court pressing inward, could sense the calculating glances of other nobles trying to decipher what had captured the prince's attention so completely. I wished the floor would open up and swallow me whole. Instead, Prince Kale took a step closer. The movement was small, yet it erased the polite distance that had existed moments before. I felt the warmth radiating from him, the steady, controlled power in the way he carried himself. He did not tower aggressively, nor did he touch me, but his presence alone felt like a hand at my waist, steadying and claiming in equal measure. "What is your name?" he asked. "Elion," I said, forcing my voice not to tremble. "Elion Vale." His gaze flickered briefly, recognition passing through it as he placed my family name among the lesser branches of nobility. "Elion," he repeated. The way he said it made my chest tighten. He leaned in slightly, not enough to scandalize the court, but enough that I felt his breath ghost against the side of my neck. My entire body reacted instantly, heat pooling low and unwelcome beneath my ribs. I hated that he could provoke that response so easily. His eyes closed for the briefest moment. Another inhale. Deeper this time. A shudder ran through him, subtle but unmistakable. "Interesting," he murmured. My heart stumbled. "What is?" I asked before I could stop myself. "You," he replied coolly. The single word struck harder than any elaborate compliment could have. I swallowed, aware that the entire ballroom was watching now. The prince had never lingered this long. He had never looked at anyone like this. There was no polite detachment in his expression anymore. No boredom, only focus. And something else. Something that looked dangerously close to possession. I've met many omegas, he continued softly, just for me. None have ever made me react this way. In fact, I'm talking too much as it seems. The word carried weight. His control was legendary. His composure unbreakable. Yet standing this close, I could sense the faint tension beneath his stillness, the way his fingers flexed once at his side as though resisting the urge to reach for me. I don't understand, I whispered. That makes two of us. The master of ceremonies cleared his throat again, more urgently this time. Your Highness, the council. Prince Kale straightened, finally pulling his gaze away from me long enough to address the room. I've made my choice. The words fell into the silence like a stone into still water. Shock rippled outward instantly. The other omegas were surprised that the prince had chosen me. There were supposed to be evaluations, days and sometimes weeks of careful consideration. Not this. The prince turned back to me, and whatever uncertainty I had seen earlier was gone. You will remain in the palace, he said quietly. My throat tightened. Remain at the palace? Yes, he said firmly. The word was simple and final. 1,000 thoughts collided in my mind at once. My family, the expectations, the whispers that would follow. I felt exposed, chosen not for strategy or alliance but for something far more instinctive. Something I could not control. He extended his hand. The gesture was elegant, formal enough to satisfy the watching court. But when my fingers hovered uncertainly above his voice lowered so that only I could hear. Don't be afraid, he murmured. I won't let anyone take you from me. The possessiveness in that promise should have terrified me. Instead, it sent a dangerous warmth spiraling through my chest. Slowly, unable to deny the pull between us, I placed my hand in his. His fingers closed around mine, firm and certain. And just like that, with the entire kingdom watching, the arrogant alpha who had never been moved by any omega claimed me. The walk from the ballroom to his private chambers felt longer than the entire journey from my family estate to the capital. I was aware of everything and nothing at once. The polished marble beneath my shoes. The echo of our footsteps along the corridor. The way the guards bowed instantly when they saw him, their eyes flickering briefly toward me with open curiosity. Word would spread within minutes. Probably already had. The prince had chosen me. Kale did not release my hand as we walked. His grip was not painful, not forceful, but steady, unyielding in a way that made it clear I was not simply accompanying him. I was being kept. The palace corridors grew quieter the farther we moved from the grand hall. The music faded behind us, replaced by a hush that felt almost sacred. I stole a glance at him. His expression had changed. The public mask, the bored, detached air, was gone. In its place was something far more focused. His jaw was set, his eyes darker, as if whatever restraint he had practiced in the ballroom was thinning with every step. When we reached a pair of heavy carved doors, the guard stationed outside straightened instantly. Leave us, Prince Kale ordered them. The doors opened up. His private chambers were nothing like I had imagined. They were grand, yes, but not ostentatious. Dark wood, tall windows draped in deep blue fabric, shelves lined with books and maps, a low fire burning steadily in the hearth. It felt less like a prince's display room and more like a strategist's sanctuary. The doors shut behind us with a soft, decisive click. Silence fell. For the first time since he had stopped before me in the ballroom, we were alone. My pulse roared in my ears. He released my hand slowly, but the absence of his touch felt more noticeable than the contact had. I clasped my fingers together in front of me to steady them. Your Highness, I began. Kale, he corrected immediately. His voice was lower now, stripped of its formal projection. It filled the room without effort. I hesitated. Kale, I amended softly. He stepped closer. The space between us shrank until I could feel the warmth of him again, that steady alpha presence pressing against my senses like a tide. My scent, traitorous and bold, seemed to rise in response, weaving into the air between us. His nostrils flared slightly. You're suppressing, he said again. I swallowed. Yes. His eyes searched my face as though looking for something beyond my expression. He took another step forward. Instinctively, I stepped back until my shoulders brushed lightly against the closed door. The realization sent a tremor through me. I wasn't really trapped and he had not touched me. But the proximity alone was enough to make my breathing uneven. His hand lifted. I flinched only slightly. But he did not grab me. He placed his palm against the door beside my head instead, bracing himself there, close enough that I felt caged by his presence without a single finger laid on my skin. "Do you have any idea what your scent is doing to me?" he murmured, his voice dropping to something almost rough. My throat tightened. "No, sir." He leaned closer. Just enough that his breath ghosted over the curve of my neck. My entire body reacted instantly. Heat bloomed beneath my skin, my pulse racing wildly as if it were trying to escape my chest. "I have met countless omegas like I said earlier," he continued softly. "Diplomatic alliances, noble houses, strategic candidates." His lips curved faintly, but there was no amusement in it. None of them ever made me lose focus. "You walked into that ballroom," he went on, his voice almost thoughtful now, and it was as if something struck me. His fingers flexed slightly against the wood near my head. I had never imagined that someone like him, so powerful, so composed, could sound unsettled. "Maybe it's just the atmosphere or the excitement of the ball," I said slowly. His eyes snapped back to mine. "It's not that," he said firmly. There was certainty in his tone. Absolute and unwavering. He inhaled again, slower this time, as though deliberately testing himself. His eyes fluttered closed for a brief second, and I saw it. The crack in his control. The way his shoulders tensed. The faint tightening of his jaw. When he opened his eyes again, they were darker than before. "You're different," he said. My breath hitched. "Different how?" He studied me for a long moment before answering. "You don't smell like the others." His gaze softened slightly, though the intensity remained. "You smell like something that belongs to me." The word should have frightened me. But instead of fear, something warm and dangerous unfurled inside my chest. "I'm not an object," I whispered, though the protest lacked strength. His expression shifted instantly. "I know," he said quietly. And for the first time since entering the room, his tone held something gentler. He lowered his hand from the door, giving me space again. "I would never treat you as one," he added. The sincerity in his voice startled me more than the possessiveness had. He stepped back fully this time, running a hand through his dark hair as if trying to steady himself. "This is inconvenient," he muttered, almost to himself. "Inconvenient?" I echoed. "Yes," he replied sharply. His gaze returned to me, sharp but honest. "Because I don't like not being in control." A strange, fragile laugh escaped me before I could stop it. That earned a flicker of surprise from him. "You find this amusing?" he asked. "Not at all," I said quickly, shaking my head. "It's just that I never imagined the Crown Prince would admit that." For a heartbeat, something almost warm touched his expression. He approached again, slower this time, as if giving me the chance to step away if I wished. But I didn't. His hand lifted once more, and this time his fingers brushed lightly against my wrist. The contact was gentle, almost reverent. "You're staying in the palace, under my protection." It didn't sound as an order, but as a decision already made in his mind. His thumb traced faint circles against my pulse, letting me know his obsession was already taking root. He made me wonder if he was actually just playing games with me, but the reminder that I was the first Omega to get so close to him made my heart flutter for reasons I didn't know. The next morning, the palace no longer felt like a place of gold and music. It felt like a storm waiting to break. Word of the prince's decision had spread before sunrise. Servants moved more carefully when I passed. Guards stood straighter. Courtiers who had once overlooked my existence now watched me with thinly veiled curiosity, and in some cases poorly hidden resentment. I had not earned their scrutiny through strategy or achievement. I had earned it with a single breath. And Prince Kale did nothing to quiet the rumors. If anything, he made them worse. He had chambers prepared for me in the East Wing, close enough to his own that a short corridor connected them privately. The gesture alone was enough to send the court into speculation. Traditionally, selected Omegas were given time. Formal dinners, public appearances, gradual integration into royal life. Kale skipped all of that. "You'll stay here where I can reach you," he said simply as he escorted me to the new rooms himself, ignoring the startled expressions of the staffs. His words were calm and possessive. My chambers were beautiful, soft blue drapery, tall windows overlooking the inner gardens, polished floors warmed by woven rugs. It was far grander than anything I had known. And yet, standing in the center of it, I felt less like a guest and more like something carefully placed. "You don't have to," I began. "I do," he interrupted gently. His gaze moved slowly around the room, assessing exits, windows, sightlines. Not admiring the decor but evaluating security. You underestimate how quickly the court turns cruel when it doesn't understand something, he said. He met my set. Before I could respond, a servant entered with a tray of tea. Prince Kale's expression shifted instantly, subtle but sharp. He stepped forward before I could even reach for the cup. He took it first. Tasted it. The room went very still. The servant looked horrified. Your Highness, I would never. I know, Kale said calmly, setting the cup down only after a deliberate pause. But he doesn't. The implication settled into my chest with confusing warmth. After the servant left, I stared at him. You think someone would poison me? I think, he replied evenly, that power shifts make people desperate. And I'm a power shift? His eyes softened slightly, though the intensity never fully left. You are to me. The words lingered in the air between us. That was the first time I understood the depth of what had begun. It was not simple attraction. It was not curiosity that would fade with familiarity. It was fixation. Over the following days, the pattern became undeniable. He attended council meetings as required, but he shortened them and dismissed them early. Delegated what he normally handled personally. When questioned, he offered no elaborate explanation. I have more pressing matters, he would say. And somehow those words always brought his gaze back to me. He began appearing unexpectedly throughout my day. In the gardens, in the library, outside my chambers just as I stepped into the corridor, as though he had sensed the exact moment I moved. Once I paused mid-step and turned sharply. He was already there. Leaning casually against the wall, arms crossed, eyes fixed on me with quiet satisfaction. How long have you been standing there? I asked. Long enough, he replied. For what? To make sure you were still here. The answer sent a strange flutter through me. You act as though I might disappear, I said lightly. His expression did not change. I would notice immediately if you did. There was no arrogance in his tone. Only certainty. The guards assigned to my wing doubled within days. At first, I assumed it was protocol. Then I overheard two nobles whispering in a corner of the courtyard. He's obsessed, one murmured. It's unnatural, the other replied. He's never behaved like this. I should have been embarrassed. Instead, heat crept into my cheeks for an entirely different reason. That evening, as dusk painted the sky in deep violet hues, I found him waiting in the sitting room adjoining my chambers. He was seated in a high-backed chair, one leg crossed over the other, a report forgotten in his hand. You're late, he said without looking up. I wasn't aware I had a curfew, I replied carefully. His gaze lifted slowly. You don't, he said. But I prefer knowing where you are. The honesty of it disarmed me. Why were you waiting? I asked quietly. He set the report aside and stood. The distance between us vanished in a few measured steps. Because when you're not within reach, my focus fractures, he said, voice low. His hand rose, brushing lightly against my sleeve before sliding to my wrist. His thumb pressed gently against the steady rhythm of my pulse. And I don't like feeling distracted. The admission carried more vulnerability than he likely intended. You're the crown prince, I said softly. You command armies, you negotiate treaties. You've faced battlefields. His lips curved faintly. Yes. And I unsettle you? Yes, you do. The simplicity of the answer stole my breath. He leaned closer, inhaling once more, not as sharply as that first night, but deliberately. His eyes closed briefly and I felt the faint tremor in his restraint. Your scent lingers everywhere you go, he murmured. In the corridors, in the garden air. It follows me even after you leave. I should have felt self-conscious. Instead, something tender unfurled inside my chest. Does it bother you? I asked. He opened his eyes, gaze locking onto mine. No, he said. It anchors me. The word struck deeper than I expected. He could have said temptation instead or distraction. But he used the word anchor. His hand slid from my wrist to the small of my back. Not forceful, just firm enough to remind me of his presence. His touch was warm, steady, and protective. I don't share what's mine, he said quietly. There was again. The possessiveness no longer startled me the way it had before. It felt less like ownership and more like a vow forming without ceremony. You speak as though I've already agreed to stay, I said, though my voice lacked conviction. His gaze softened. You haven't tried to leave, he replied. And he was right. Despite the whispers, despite the scrutiny, despite the intensity of his attention, I had stayed. Because beneath the obsession, beneath the watchful guards and the careful tasting of tea, there was something else. He looked at me as though I were irreplaceable. And for someone who had lived his entire life in quiet insignificance, that feeling was dangerously sweet. That night, long after the palace had fallen silent, I woke to a faint shift in the air. I opened my eyes. He was standing near the window, silhouetted against moonlight, watching me sleep. When he realized I was awake, he did not look embarrassed. Go back to sleep, he said softly. Why are you here? I asked. To get a glimpse of you, he replied in the most unbothering way. For the first time since arriving at the palace, I began to feel the edges of the gilded cage. It was not obvious at first. Nothing Prince Kale did was overtly cruel or suffocating. My days were comfortable. My chambers were warm. The gardens were open to me, and the staff treated me with a reverence that bordered on fear. But the awareness never left. Eyes followed me, footsteps lingered behind me. Doors that once opened freely now required quiet nods from guards who bowed a little too deeply. Protection, Prince Kale had called it. But protection, I was beginning to realize, could feel very similar to confinement. It happened on the 6th morning after the ball. I woke before sunrise, restless and unsettled. My scent had stabilized somewhat, though it still carried that deeper sweetness that reacted so violently to Kale's presence. I dressed simply, without summoning attendants, and slipped quietly into the corridor. The palace at dawn was almost peaceful. Cool air drifted through high windows. Torches burned low, their flames dim and sleepy. For the first time in days I felt alone. I walked toward the eastern gardens, intending nothing more than a breath of fresh air beyond the walls that seemed to close in tighter each night. But as I stepped past the final archway that marked the boundary of the inner wing, 2 guards shifted, blocking my way. My lord, one of them said carefully, His Highness instructed that you inform him before leaving the immediate grounds. I stopped. I'm not leaving the grounds, I replied calmly. I'm only taking a walk. The guard hesitated. Beyond this gate requires notice. What do you mean by that? I stared at the ironwork before me. Beyond it lay the outer gardens, then the palace gates, then the world I had known before this. I had not planned to go that far. But suddenly I wanted to. Not to escape. Just to prove that I could. I won't be long, I said, stepping forward. The guards exchanged a look. And that was all it took for something inside me to tighten. I am not a prisoner, I added, more sharply than intended. Before either of them could respond, a familiar presence pressed into the air behind me. Warm and dominant. You are not a prisoner, Prince Kale's voice said smoothly. I did not turn immediately. I could feel him there without looking. My scent responded before I did, unfurling subtly, betraying the spike of emotion in my chest. You woke early, he continued, footsteps closing the distance. I finally turned to face him. He was dressed simply, without ceremonial attire, dark hair slightly disheveled as though he had risen in haste. But his eyes were alert, too alert. You knew I was gone, I said quietly. I always know, he replied. There was no arrogance in it. I folded my arms, trying to steady the tremor beneath my composure. I wanted air. The guard stepped back silently as Kale approached me fully. He did not raise his voice. He did not scold. He simply stopped close enough that I felt the steady heat of him. Do you think that I wouldn't notice the moment your scent moved farther from mine? He asked softly. My breath caught. His gaze lowered slightly, as though mapping the invisible trail I had left behind me through the corridor. You think I'm exaggerating, he continued. But when you walked past that second archway, something in me tightened. His jaw flexed. I had never heard him speak that way before. You can't expect me to stay within arm's reach forever, I said, though the words lacked the firmness I intended. His eyes lifted back to mine. I don't expect, he said quietly. I prefer. The distinction did not comfort me. Kale, I said carefully, testing the sound of his name in a way that felt more intimate now than before. I need space. I need to know I can move without being tracked by my own scent. His expression shifted at that. He stepped closer, but not enough to corner me. I am not tracking you like prey but reacting to you. he said, and for the first time, there was something raw beneath his calm exterior. The honesty in his voice disarmed my frustration. When you move beyond what I can sense clearly, it feels wrong. As if something essential is missing, he said, quieter now. The admission should have soothed me. Instead, it frightened me in a different way. You don't own me, I whispered. His reaction was immediate. His hand lifted, not to grab but to rest lightly at my waist. Firm and grounding. I know, he said. And he did not look offended. He looked almost wounded. I don't want to own you, he added. I want you where I can protect you. But there are guards everywhere, I argued. They protect the crown, he replied evenly. I protect you. The distinction settled heavily between us. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The early morning air wrapped around us, cool and quiet. My pulse gradually slowed beneath his steady gaze. You're afraid? I realized softly. His jaw tightened. I am being cautious. He exhaled slowly, and in that breath I heard the truth he rarely allowed anyone to see. I don't like losing what's mine, he said. There was again. But this time it did not sound like possession. It sounded like fear. His thumb brushed once against my side, barely there. When I chose you, he continued, I didn't expect this intensity. I don't know what your scent awakened in me. But I know that the thought of you beyond these walls, unguarded, unsettles me more than any battlefield ever has. I searched his face. The arrogant composure others saw was gone. In its place stood a man struggling with something he could not command. I'm not trying to run, I said gently. His eyes softened immediately. I know. Then walk with me, I offered. The word surprised even me. He stilled. Something in his expression shifted, something almost vulnerable. He nodded once. The guard stepped aside without question this time. As we passed through the gate together, the tension in his shoulders eased slightly. His hand remained at my waist, not restraining, simply present. You see, I murmured as the morning breeze brushed against us both. I'm still here. His lips curved faintly. I would notice if you weren't. And though part of me still feared the depth of his attachment, another part, quieter, softer, felt strangely warmed by it. Because for all his obsession, for all his possessive instincts, Prince Kale did not cage me out of dominance. He held on because he was terrified of letting go. And that, I was beginning to understand, was far more dangerous than arrogance. The truth about my scent was not discovered in a dramatic revelation. It unraveled slowly, like silk being pulled thread by thread. By the end of the second week in the palace, it had become impossible to ignore the pattern. My suppressants dulled the sharpest edges, but they did not erase the underlying pull. Whenever Prince Kale entered a room, the air shifted. My scent deepened instinctively, responding to him as though recognizing something long before my mind could understand it. And he reacted every single time. The royal physician was summoned under the guise of routine evaluation. I sat in a quiet chamber lined with ancient texts and polished instruments while the elderly beta examined me with careful professionalism. Prince Kale stood inside, arms folded, silent but unmistakably present, watching every move. The physician took samples, measured responses, asked questions about my family lineage, names I had not spoken in years, distant relatives whose histories blurred together in my memory. Has anyone in your bloodline ever bonded with royalty before? He asked mildly. Not directly, I replied. We are a minor branch. The physician hummed thoughtfully. Prince Kale's gaze never left me. After what felt like hours, the physician stepped back, adjusting his spectacles with slow precision. This is unusual, he murmured. Prince Kale straightened slightly. Explain. The physician cleared his throat. Your Highness, Lord Elion's scent carries a dormant compatibility trait. It is extremely rare. It has appeared only a handful of times in recorded royal history. My pulse quickened. What kind of trait? Kale asked, his voice calm but edged. One that aligns specifically with ruling alphas, the physician continued. An instinctive bond marker. When activated, it creates heightened resonance between compatible pairs. Suppressants will never fully conceal it, especially not from the intended match. The room went very still. Intended match. I felt Kale's focus sharpen like a blade. You're suggesting, he said slowly, that this is biological. Yes, Your Highness. It's not manipulation. The physician blinked. Certainly not. Heat crept up my neck at the implication. Prince Kale's jaw tightened briefly before he exhaled through his nose, something like grim satisfaction flickering across his features. As I thought, he murmured. I stared at him. His gaze shifted to me, intense but not mocking. I thought that I have never reacted this way to anyone before. There had to be a reason. The physician gathered his instruments, clearly sensing that whatever passed between us next was no longer medical territory. Once we were alone, the silence thickened. So, I said softly, trying to steady the storm in my chest, I was engineered to drive you insane? A faint huff of breath escaped him, almost a laugh. Don't flatter yourself, he replied dryly. But the warmth in his eyes betrayed him. He stepped closer, slower than usual, as though aware that this revelation shifted something delicate between us. It explains why suppressants fail, he continued. Why your scent intensifies around me. Why mine reacts to yours. I swallowed. And what does that mean? He reached for me then, not abruptly, not possessively, but deliberately. His hand settled at my waist, steady and warm. It means, he said, voice low, that whatever this is, it isn't temporary. The words settled heavily into my chest. I had clung to that possibility in quiet moments. The idea that his obsession might fade once the novelty wore off. That the intensity would dull into something manageable. But this was getting deeper than attraction. It sounds like fate, I whispered. His eyes darkened slightly. I don't believe in surrendering to fate, he said. I believe in choosing. His thumb brushed slowly along the curve of my waist, grounding, deliberate. And I choose you. The simplicity of it struck harder than any elaborate declaration. But what if I don't want to be chosen because of compatibility charts and ancient bloodlines? I asked quietly. His expression softened immediately. Then don't accept me for that reason, he said. The answer surprised me. Accept me because I can't breathe properly when you leave a room, he continued. Because I cut meetings short just to check if you've eaten. Because I wake in the middle of the night and walk to your door without realizing I've moved. His honesty stole the air from my lungs. Because when I think of you belonging to someone else, he finished, voice tightening just slightly, it feels intolerable. There was again. That dangerous word. Belonging. But this time it did not sound like ownership. It sounded like fear of loss. I studied him carefully. The kingdom saw an unshakable air. A strategist. A warrior who never faltered. Standing in front of me was something else entirely. A man who had discovered a vulnerability he could not command. You look satisfied, I observed gently. A faint smirk touched his lips. I am. Because now I know I'm not losing my mind. Despite everything, I laughed softly. The tension in the room eased, but the intensity remained. Now the thought of leaving felt heavier than the thought of staying. If this bond forms, he continued softly, it will be because you want it. Not because some ancient trait decided it. His hand rose slowly, brushing back a loose strand of hair from my forehead. The gesture was unexpectedly tender. You are not valuable to me because of compatibility, he added. You are valuable because when you look at me like that, I feel attracted to you. He said quietly. The arrogant alpha who commanded armies found stability in me. The realization sent warmth spiraling through my chest. Without thinking, I reached up and touched his sleeve lightly. And if I choose you? I asked. His breath caught, barely but enough. Then I will spend the rest of my life proving that it was the right choice. After the physician left and the weight of compatibility, choice and consequence lingered between us, Kale did not retreat into duty or command. Instead he stayed. He sat with me in silence, close enough that our shoulders nearly touched. It was raining that night, a slow, steady fall that blurred the palace windows and wrapped the world outside in shadow. I stood near the glass, watching droplets trace uneven paths downward, my thoughts tangled and restless. Kale approached quietly. He stopped beside me, close enough that I could feel his warmth, yet he kept his hands carefully to himself. You're thinking too loudly, he said softly. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. You don't know what I'm thinking. No, he admitted. But I know when you're carrying too much. I turned to face him then. I allowed myself to see him not as the crown prince, but as the alpha whose obsession had shaken the court. When the rain softened and the palace slept, Prince Kale stood before me, close enough that our breaths mingled, Yet he did not touch me until I lifted my hand first. My fingers brushed his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart beneath layers of fabric and control. His hands came up slowly, cupping my face as though I were something fragile rather than powerful. His thumbs brushed warmth into my skin, grounding me, asking permission without words. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. I shook my head. "I choose you," I said. The words felt terrifying and right all at once. Then he leaned closer and he kissed me. There was warmth in him. A quiet click, like two pieces finally aligning after years of being kept apart. When his mark sealed at my neck, it was gentle, almost reverent, and the moment our scents intertwined fully, the tension faded. His presence wrapping around me like armor. When it was over, he did not pull away. He rested his forehead against mine, breathing me in softly. And in that quiet, rain-soaked night, my life blurred into one undeniable truth. I did not fall for Kale because he was powerful. I fell for him because when he chose me, he did it with restraint, fear, and a devotion so deep it reshaped us both. We had a lavish grand wedding at the palace, my parents present, smiling as though I had won in life. I turned to my alpha Prince Kale, our scents intertwining between us as we shared vows and promises to each other. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, comment and subscribe to my channel for more interesting BL stories. Thanks for watching, see you next time.